There are so many great RPGs releasing this year, and it all kicks off with Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. I've played around 30 hours or so with it, and I believe it's one of the best JRPGs I've played in years. In terms of the Yakuza franchise, I think it might be the best in the series. Let's talk about it. To kick things off, I actually want to talk about how slow the start is in this game. I think most JRPGs are slow, but for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, it just feels so much more pronounced. The first chapter will run you around 2 to 2.5 hours, and it really acts as an epilogue to Like a Dragon and a prologue to Infinite Wealth. There's a lot to cover, and the gameplay through this chapter is really rare. You're kind of in control a couple of times, but mostly it's just dialogue and exposition. But it is nice to catch up with Ichiban and his crew after they became the heroes of Yokohama. Now, even as you progress through that chapter, the game will feel brutally slow at times. And that's because there's all these different systems and mechanics in play. And that even extends to when you get to chapter 2 and 3, because once you hit Hawaii, you're probably expecting for the game to really open up, but the game is still trying to gradually build itself up. But at least in these chapters, 2 through 4, you're really getting introduced to all the new mini games and systems that are going to assist you in gaining experience, money, and gear. It can take around 10 hours or so, depending on your playstyle, depending how, if you want to just kind of grind a little bit, until you reach chapter 5. And this is where the game really takes off. You're going to be introduced to a dungeon that will allow you to grind for experience, gear, and most importantly, money. If you're struggling for cash like I was because of how expensive everything is, don't worry. Once you hit chapter 5 and you unlock this dungeon, you're going to be raking in thousands of dollars. My eyes got wide when I saw the amount of money I was making, and I decided to grind the dungeon until I had enough to buy 3 to 4 star gear. And yeah, gaining levels was nice too. You'll also finally unlock the job system, which is amazing. And I'm not going to spoil anything here in this video, but like the first game, the cutscenes that lead to the different epiphanies that Ichigo and his team have are amazing. Next up, let's talk about the combat and how being able to just move just a little bit, even if you have like a very small space, you're kind of restricted, is just amazing for this game because it really adds a different layer of strategy. Because that's all you really need. That's going to help you line up enemies and execute back attacks and knockbacks. Early on, when you're lower leveled, it's recommended that you work on positioning to knock enemies into each other or into the environment. You get told that a couple times because it really does help maximize your damage and it opens up the possibility for big damage for the next teammate. Combat as you go along will get more in depth once you unlock the ability to get drinks with your team. Anytime the game mentions that a drink link is available, you should immediately take it because it will unlock chain attacks, follow-ups, and team attacks. This makes combat at any level so much easier. Being able to knock enemies into your opponents for chain attacks and then watch your team follow up afterwards is fantastic. You're always going to do pretty big damage, and this will greatly shorten fights that may take longer and become more resource intensive if you haven't unlocked those mechanics. Seriously, do yourself a favor and do the drink links as often as possible. When you get the opportunity, and if you have an extra bit of cash, make sure that you buy throwables. They're guaranteed to hit for a certain amount of damage, and if there's a mini boss that is giving you trouble, it can help turn the tide. You can buy a rocket launcher, and I'm not saying that you should because it's expensive, but it's well worth it if you're trying to rush through certain areas. You also have access to pound mates, which is how you're going to summon, but this can be pretty expensive early on. I think it's like $300 for the first couple of summons, and for one of the better ones, it's like $5,000. So I really don't recommend it unless you have thousands of dollars saved up or you are desperate to kill a boss. So just keep that in mind. Moving on, I want to talk about embracing the different systems. And if you played Like a Dragon, you'll notice that there was a lot that you had to keep account of. Same stuff here, and I think there's just a little bit more. There's so much stuff here to pay attention to that it's really hard to keep count. You know, you're reintroduced to the treasure finder mechanic, which allows you to search for items whenever you see a golden circle. And at first it seems like it's all kind of useless again because it's almost all junk stuff that you really can't utilize. But, you know, instead of selling it, hoard. Because when you hold on to that junk and eventually you get to Hawaii, you're going to find a vendor who's going to reward you for the trash you come across. And that shop has amazing gear. And I recommend you use Treasure Finder whenever you can because it's well worth it. This really basically applies to all the smaller systems in Infinite Wealth. Like you're introduced to the Aloha Link, and this is basically this big friend-finding app. You're going to meet all these characters who are going to have icons above their heads, and you're going to want to greet them whenever you can. Give them gifts, save them, whatever. Do this early because Kay, who's the poster girl at Revolve, she will reward you with pretty good gear. And we're talking like 2 to 4-star gear, and it's insane because all you have to do is just say hi to people. The more people you meet, the better gear you get. It is that easy. The systems that Infinite Wealth have in place are there to help you. When something new gets introduced, you're going to get a tutorial message. And you're probably going to dismiss it because, sometimes it feels like it's just to like a little mini game or something that you're going to feel that's not important, but it's more than likely something that you're going to do naturally, like collecting herbs or fruit or picking up shrine tickets. Like I said, you're rewarded for being a hoarder, which is crazy, right? Because most games do not reward you for that type of behavior. You're no longer considered a weirdo for hoarding all that trash because it, in fact, will be turned into treasure. Even Sujimon, which is its return from Like a Dragon, is a system that will help you earn money and gear early on. The big difference is that it's now Pokemon, and you fight the weirdos you happen to capture. It's strangely addicting too, and you aren't punished for losing. So, when you're in combat in this game, if you happen to fail, you will lose a nice chunk of money. But if you fail in Sujimon, you just need to train and recruit more. So there's really nothing that will punish you from doing it. I mean, just embrace all of these different systems because all of them will help you get along, especially early on. Now that we've talked about Sujimon, let's talk about the side quest. I feel like they're fantastic in Infinite Wealth. All of them lead to new mini games or mini boss encounters, and here's where you're going to get a lot of money and gear. And sometimes with these big fights, you're going to get increased experience. Certain side stories will unlock new pound mates, and these are generally really fun. There's one with the director that I found to be like the best in the game because you essentially have to run through traffic. It's just really funny. And listen, I mentioned before that summoning a pound mate is very expensive, but they will help you in a pinch. The side stories found here in Infinite Wealth will reference past appearances in Like a Dragon, but even if you didn't play the game, they do provide a bit of background on these characters, so you won't be confused or left out. Well, scratch that. You're probably still going to be confused because what happens during these side stories is still wild. I believe that Infinite Wealth really tried to assist the player from getting away from the traditional RPG grind with these side stories. And, like I said before, some of these are better than the others, but they're all great, in my opinion. Some will provide you with items early on that will help you save your party when certain enemies do high damaging AoE attacks. I remember it takes a while to earn enough money to unlock an item that will heal your entire party, but there is a side story that you can find very early on that will get you fruit cups that will heal for 400 HP to everybody. It's amazing. I was kind of stunned that I got it too because I was like, this is probably gonna get me some weird small accessory, but no, it actually got me one of the most useful items in the game. It's recommended if you want to take a break from the grind of a turn-based RPG that you find a side story to help as a distraction. Like I said, some of these can be fairly lengthy, and because they turn to these like new mini games or full-blown games, like they're just always fun to play. There's a Tinder-like game that once you're introduced to really never goes the way you want it to, even if you complete it pretty much with like no mistakes, and every one of those endings are hilarious. Eventually, you're going to find a quest around chapter 5, I think near the end of it. And it is insane to me just how in-depth this is. So, if you're a fan of cabaret management, they kick it up a notch with this new excursion. And it can be pretty addicting when we were watching everything come together. It really feels like they changed all of the mechanics in this one game because Ichiban just doesn't control the same way. But when you're going and just kind of building this place and doing all these different things, it is amazing how many hours I put into it. I think I stopped playing the main game for 5 hours just because I was just enamored by watching everything kind of grow and build very quickly. It was very satisfying. So I think the side content in this game is a ton of fun, and they're just great time wasters. And seriously, play Sujimon. It is just so much fun to do. Seeing them fight each other and then fighting the different gym leaders. When you get the chance, play Sujimon. You won't be disappointed. So before we end the video, I want to talk about the job system. I think that it's such a tease that early on in this game, when you're lower leveled and you're trying to struggle through some of these fights, that you'll come across a number of different items. And these items are for jobs that you don't have yet. And you're going to pick up like 10 of the same gun, of the same surfboard, that type of stuff. And you're probably saying to yourself, I can sell these and make money off it. And you're not wrong. Thing is, you're going to want to save up at least one or two of them because you're going to use that to craft different gear. It's really important because the moment you unlock crafting in this game, you're going to find some really cool weapons. Really unique weapons are going to do a lot of damage. So the thing about the job system in this game is, by the time you do unlock it, you're probably telling yourself, right now, my characters are probably job level 10, 15. They have so many different abilities, I don't want to start over. Who cares? Just straight up saying that. Go wild with it. I really feel like Ichiban's job system as the hero to start is honestly just okay to me. It's really good in some parts, but when you are going out and picking up some of these different jobs, they're just so enticing in comparison. And some of the new ones are fantastic. But I will say this. The only character that I have not touched or not changed at all is Kiryu. I have not changed him at all because as enticing as it is to see him in a different job, he is so strong and so badass in his base form, I don't want to touch him at all. Seriously, it's probably the only real downside of the job system is that, while I think every job is great and all the new ones are really fun, I think Kiryu in his base form is just better than all of them. Now, you can take certain abilities from other jobs as long as you are a high enough link or high enough rank. That's completely fine. But Kiryu by himself is a menace. And pretty much, he just does so much damage in his base form. He gets 3 different forms to start with, so he can just kind of do what he wants to enemies. He can be incredibly quick with his attacks. He can do combos. He can do heat attacks. I mean, he's just great as is. And just leveling him up just yields you so many different abilities that do so much damage. So that's pretty much the only downside to the job system is that while everyone else, Ichiban included, can really go for a change in scenery, Kiryu is like the one character that you do not need to change. He's practically perfect as is. So just pointing that out. When you get to the job system, hopefully someone proves me wrong, but I just feel like every time I play this Kiryu, I was like, that dude is amazing. Like, why is he doing so much damage? What's the point of changing him? Even though he does look really cool in one of the outfits. I'm just pointing that out. But that's all I'm going to say about the jobs. Fantastic. All the new additions. I just want to say that I really wish they could have incentivized making a change to Kiryu. Overall, I think Infinite Wealth is fantastic. I think it's going to be in my top 10 for the year. I think it's going to stay there, and I'm fairly certain that the way it is working right now, that when the credits finally roll, this is probably going to stay in my top 10 and potentially creep into my top 5. It really depends on how some other games pan out, but this game is just great. It really nails its combat, exploration, side stories, and mini games to a level that I don't think any title in the franchise can match, and quite frankly, there are JRPGs that just don't even come close. The game just starts slow, and that's probably the only real downside, but the build-up is worth it. The only real bug I ran into during my time with this game is that in combat, sometimes when I'm fighting a mini-boss, sometimes one of the characters will kind of stall, and it'll just kind of sit there in motion for like 30 to 40 seconds. It made me feel like I had to restart the encounter or restart the game, but I didn't have to because eventually it just kind of came out of it and attacked. But it's probably the only hiccup that I've seen so far. I want to give a big shout out to RGG Studio also because they created, somehow, they've created 2 side excursions that have such depth to them that they will absolutely distract you from the main game. I think that putting 5 hours into one of these side excursions was insane to me. And I feel like if I did not leave this place, that I would have put in 20 to 30 hours. It was that addicting. So when you find it, and you should around like chapter 5 or 6, you're probably going to be sitting there like, this is either going to be great for you or you're just going to dismiss it. But it was amazing for me. Like, they were like, you can go back now. I'm like, no, I'm staying right here. I love this place. So that's generally how I felt about doing that side excursion. That was just amazing. And that's going to do it for this video. If you happen to like the content, please consider sharing, and subscribing. I am Ken from Pixelated Thoughts, and I'll talk to you next time.